Welcome to Crime Clueless. I'm your host, Jenna. Today I have a very special episode for you. I had the privilege of sitting down with Nancy Anderson's brother, Jack Anderson, who was instrumental in getting Nancy's case solved. Today, the day this episode comes out, happens to be the 53rd anniversary of when Nancy was murdered, and I want to honor her legacy by sharing this with you. Jack was kind enough to talk about memories growing up, tell some behind the scenes information, some things that have never been told before. We also got to talk about his book, The Brittle Riddle. You can find that at dnajustice.org. All the proceeds from this book go to support DNA Justice, and we'll talk more about what that is in this episode. I hope that you find it as fascinating as I did, and thank you again to Jack for his time. And if you're ready, here is our conversation. Hello.
Hello, is this Jenna?
It is. Is this Jack?
It is. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I have a little bit of a cold.
It seems like it's going around.
It is.
Did you guys have a nice New Year's?
We did. It was pretty quiet, but we got out for a little bit and we got home early.
Oh, that's
But
nice.
yeah, it was fine. Yep.
That's my preference too.
Yeah. So, so I'm willing to talk. I talk to the media all the time, and we're willing to talk because we were really quiet for 50 years. And as soon as this looked like it was going to get solved, we and the media started contacting us.
Mm-hmm.
We were like, yeah, we'll talk. The more exposure it gets, the better we feel, because we don't know much about this guy that kills Nancy.
Right.
We just don't know much about him. So the more the word gets out there, we're not holding our breath, but maybe somebody out there will chime in and say, hey, I knew that guy in high school, or I knew that guy in college, and here's the deal. Or somebody might say, I knew how he knew Nancy, because we don't even know how they knew each other.
That's what I keep wondering about. How did they meet? How did they connect?
Yeah, we don't know. We have nothing, as far as connecting the two of them together in any way. It's all speculation.
Right.
Did they meet at McDonald's? Did they meet on Waikiki Beach? Was it a friend of a friend?
Someone has to know something.
Somebody, yeah, if they're still alive.
Right.
Now, 50 years later, a lot can happen, but we just don't know.
Interesting.
That he got the career that he had because he was already kind of a strange person, even in his college years. They found his car. I'll just share one story that's public. It's out. If you want to go search for it, you can find it. But they found his car when he was in college at around the same time my sister was living in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm. He
reported it stolen, but it was actually at a girl's dorm.
Oh, wow.
So the speculation is he was already kind of a creepy guy, and, he was doing some not too great things, and, had a history of that kind of weird things.
I keep wondering if he'll be linked to anything else now that his DNA is in the system and as you get the word out more.
Well, that's the interesting part. His DNA was in the system for quite a long time.
Oh.
Just so you know. Because they had his once, okay, not like 50 years, but in the early 2000s, we were the family, probably the predominant family that pushed Hawaii every step of the way. They're a little bit behind the other states just because they're kind of isolated.
Right.
We pushed them to get a cold case unit in the early 2000s. We pushed them.
How did you get them to open that, that unit?
We just kept bugging them.
I love that.
That's what we would do. It's mainly my sister Carol and I. We tag team quite a bit. They didn't cover this like I covered it in my book, but they didn't cover it. They streamlined the People magazine story to make it really simple, which it's appreciated because it makes it a cleaner story.
Sure.
You get into too many of these details and it can get confusing when you're trying to tell a story.
Right.
But I went there I was in the Oregon Air National Guard, and we deployed for 2 weeks to Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii, in like 1994, one of those years in the mid 90s.
Mhm.
And so before I went there, I got a power of attorney from my mom because she was still alive, and I was in my mid 40s at that time, or early young 40s or 30s. And she gave me a power of attorney, and they gave me the afternoon off on a Friday. I was able to go meet with the police and try to get it reopened. We
Oh.
started communication again after 20 years. It really kind of picked it up. But, after that, we just kept, like, I got them at one point, I got them to check. There was a serial killer in Honolulu that was running around the same time Nancy was killed. He got
Mhm.
caught about a year and a half after Nancy was killed. And you do these podcasts, so you get all these gruesome details, these
Right.
creepy details. But he picked up a girl at a park bench. She was only like 16 years old,
Mhm.
and she was at a park bench, and he got her into his van and then stabbed her to death.
Oh, so the same method that was used with Nancy.
Same method. So it struck me, and he was in prison. When we finally pushed them to get a cold case unit, then we pushed him to get a DNA lab. Then they had to get certified to get the DNA good enough to submit to the National CODIS, National FBI database.
Wow.
And there again, no hits. At that point, we had good DNA, and there's no hits in the National DNA database. I got them to check this guy. They went to prison and took his DNA. He was cleared from that murder.
Oh, wow.
But at that time, it also occurred to me that probably not a serial killer that killed Nancy, at least in that sense.
Mhm.
Most serial killers look for targets of opportunity.
Right.
You got to tell young women, be careful, be aware of where you're at,
Mhm.
be conscious of what's around you, because there's creeps out there,
Right.
and they're looking for these opportunities. And that's what that guy did. When you look at Waikiki Beach, so this is what struck me at that time and ever since, is it's a bunch of little, I call them mini skyscrapers.
Mhm.
There's a whole bunch, like 2 blocks off Waikiki, even 1 block off Waikiki. You start getting into these 10-story, 8-story, 12-story, small little skyscrapers. They're
Yeah.
not super tall. And
Right.
that's what Nancy lived in. It was a 10-story little mini skyscraper. She lived on the seventh floor. There were 4 apartments on each floor.
Okay.
So when you think about a serial killer, and it had a key cat, I went to that apartment.
Oh, you
All
did.
those pictures that you see,
You took those?
those are the pictures I took in 1996 or 4 or whatever it was.
Wow.
And they used them in the video for
For people. Yeah.
People Magazine Investigates. Yeah. Because I took a picture of the key, because we knew there was a keypad. Well, it was still there. I took a picture of the back door coming out of the apartment, because it went down to an outside parking garage. Part of it
Mhm.
was underneath, but part of it was out in the open. And I just took pictures of the building and other places around Waikiki that she was frequenting and things like that.
Right.
But it occurred to me, this was not really a crime of an opportunistic serial killer, because, first of all,
Mhm.
you're going to go, okay, I'm going to pick that little mini skyscraper out of these 12. I'm going to pick that one.
Right.
And then it's okay. Now I'm going to get in here somehow, even though there's a keypad. I'm going to somehow get in there. Then I'm going to not go to the first floor, the second floor, or the fifth floor. I'm going to go to the seventh floor, and then I'm not going to go to one of these 3 apartments. I'm going to go to this apartment, and then there's 2 girls. They're each in their own room
Right.
at that time. No, Jodie Spooner was asleep in her room, and Nancy was in her room.
Mhm.
Well, then she picks Nancy's room. Way too many obstacles for this to be an opportunity.
Right.
Not like picking up somebody else, a girl all alone,
Waiting for the bus.
waiting for a bus, and there's no one around.
Mhm.
Two different scenarios, almost as complete opposite as you can get.
Absolutely.
It made sense to me that he wasn't, but we wanted him checked out. We just wanted this guy off the list, because there again, at this point, we don't know who it is. Everyone was a suspect to us.
Right. You said something about that in your book, right? Where
Yeah,
it was as important to cross people off the list as it was.
yeah. Growing up, I'd come home from school, and my older brothers and sisters sometimes would be there playing cards or playing games,
Mhm.
Scrabble or whatever games they played back in the day. And, there'd be chips and pop and all,
Mhm.
teenagers or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'd walk in, and it's just interesting how many times our conversations would go to Nancy. And because it was just this family mystery, not a clue. She had no enemies that we know of. She was only there for a few months.
Right. Such a short time.
And, so she was a very short time frame. And it's not like we had family there. It's not like we had known friends that lived there. She just went there as a dream. That's something she wanted to experience. Typically a very safe place, typically a very
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, calm, safe place to go. And it is still today.
Right.
So she did that. And yeah, so it was just this big mystery, but everyone was a suspect. So we would run everyone that was in Nancy's orbit,
Mm.
people from her high school, people from her work, people from past jobs, people, even some family members, that were distant family members,
Right.
neighbors, just to run these scenarios, right? We just constantly would talk about it and run all these scenarios because that's all we could do.
Mm-hmm.
That's all we had was an imagination and a what if and a who done it.
Oh, I can't imagine.
And so when we get to this point where we finally have DNA, and that was huge because now we have something. And it ended up being everything. Like I kind of wrote, it's the blueprint of life.
Mm-hmm.
So he left his blueprint on Nancy's blue towel. And that was huge because obviously eventually that came into play. Back in the 70s, it was nothing. All they could do was blood type.
Right.
They could tell that the blood was not her blood. It was a different blood type. Then later on in time, I remember, I think it was in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
when I went there, the officer I met with said, it's a male's blood.
Oh, okay.
They looked at it again and they were able to tell it was a male's blood. But I don't even think they even at that point pulled any DNA. There was no DNA being pulled. It was just blood type.
Right. And that wasn't until the early 2000s, right?
Then the early 2000s. And then once they tested it, once they got certified and had it put in the National CODIS database, no hits. So now we're back at square one. We have DNA,
Oh,
but there's no matches. And then when Cece gets involved,
mm.
when I got her involved, she's an angel.
She's Superwoman.
Yeah, we call the investigative genetic genealogists the new superheroes of our age
Absolutely.
because they really are doing things that were impossible,
Right.
absolutely unthought of and impossible. But for them to glean all this information out of this data that they're getting out of this DNA is incredible. So Cece gets involved and she now looks in all these databases that she has access to, 23andMe, Ancestry.com,
Right.
GenMatch, which is a medical database, and
Mm.
looks at those. And she found one distant relative, but she could not connect him.
Gotcha.
The relative was in one of the databases. There was I'm going to guess it was like probably a fourth or fifth cousin, maybe like a fifth cousin.
Yeah.
So there's enough to say, yeah, there's some relationship here. She cannot use it in the sense of tracking where he was in that family tree.
Right. Building that out.
So we're still at square one, even at that point. That's when she got creative and said, okay, I gotta do something different here. This is never going to get solved. She wanted to solve it. She's amazing.
She is.
And that's when she saw, well, wait a minute. I do see Italian, specifically Sicilian. And I guess the way she explains it, both Italian and Sicilian, but maybe that's all part of Italy. I guess there's some markers that distinguish Sicilian out from Italy itself, from the mainland Italy.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and Romanian. And it was enough of each one of those. And the way she said it, People Magazine, I didn't hear that until I saw the clip.
Oh, really?
That it was 50% each. I didn't realize it was that high of a content of Romanian and Sicilian.
Yeah.
Because the way she described it, she goes, how many people walking around in Waikiki in 1972 are half Romanian and half Sicilian? So it was close to that, right? Could have been 40%, 30% or something. But basically, a significant amount of each one of those. And that was her clue. That's when she said, okay, I have that, I can run with that. But what can I do with it? Where can I look for these?
Right.
Anyone and that's when she opened up the 1971 phone book.
Amazing.
I think it's got to be the first case in the world solved by opening up the phone book.
Yeah, the only one I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I date myself because I grew up with the phone book.
So did I when I was little.
Oh yeah. So so the phone book was just, that's how you found people. If you're looking for if you knew their name, you could look in the phone book, and sometimes you'd call 3 people to get the right John Smith that you're trying to find.
Right.
But you would eventually typically get where you're trying to go. But for her to do that by looking at last names and find the killer in the phone book was unbelievable. Even to the Hawaii police, they're like, "You're kidding me? You got this in the phone book?"
Yeah, they seemed pretty skeptical.
Yeah, and so I think it's the first one ever solved by looking in the phone book. Like I wrote, they weren't in alphabetical order under murderers. Like you go to the murderer section.
Oh my, yeah.
And okay, hey, here's an Italian. Let's try that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just looking at all the last names. she had a tuition that proved to be correct because she thought the background of population of the typical or racial markers
Mm-hmm.
is going to be Hawaiian.
Right.
At one point, she told me, I hope the murderer is not Oriental, because she goes, Orientals are hard to find in these databases because a lot of them don't submit their DNA into these databases.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of Americans that get into this DNA stuff
Mm-hmm.
because we're a bunch of mutts.
Yeah, we are.
This is my take on how all these databases started. Americans, a lot of us, like myself even,
Mm-hmm.
I want to know where I came from.
Right.
Come to find out, it's, some English, some French, some Scandinavian, whatever.
All over Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, all over Europe. But that's interesting to me. I have a good amount of Irish.
Oh,
And so now if I ever go visit Europe, maybe I can go follow that trail and
right.
follow my ancestors, over there. So that's the big thing for mutts in America, is this DNA thing has become very popular. And so we're submitting our DNA and it's building these databases with a lot of data points that they can use to cross-reference to pinpoint where the person that the question mark, the DNA with a question mark on it,
Mm-hmm.
by looking at known names of DNA with names on them and building family trees and correlating down to where that person has to be, who that person has to be. But she didn't have that. So that's pretty amazing that even at that point, she had nothing, no data. So
Mm-hmm.
DNA is still no data points, no database data points. So she never found the killer in a database.
Wow.
And that's what investigative genetic genealogists are all about. But she did
Right.
rely 100% on genealogy, which would be his lineage, his name.
Yes.
But then she said she could tell, apparently, I guess they can tell, like, if Italian, that is on the male side,
Oh,
and the Romanian is on
that's fascinating.
they call it paternal and maternal.
Right.
So the DNA will tell you these markers are on the paternal side, or these markers are on the
Wow.
maternal side. So that gave her that clue. So she knows not only maybe the percentages, but where they're coming from. So when she found him in the phone book, built his family tree, those percentages lined up significantly well, or she was expecting them to line up based on documentation. That's what the genealogy thing is, right?
Right.
Genetics is all your data in your DNA. So it's biological, and then genealogy is paper trail,
Right.
death certificates, birth certificates, family trees built, and all that stuff. So yeah, pretty incredible that after a half a century, we got an answer.
Unbelievable.
And pretty incredible that all 9 of Nancy's brothers and sisters, family of 10 kids, all of us were alive to see some justice. I mean, we're extremely pleased. I, for half a century, wanted this guy off the street because I never wanted this to happen to somebody else's sister or
Right.
mother or girlfriend or wife or whatever. But he was pretty brutal with his wife and pretty brutal with one of his girlfriends.
Yeah.
We couldn't stop any of that, but he didn't get away with it.
Mm.
So he didn't go to his death getting away with this. He had to die with the stigma of a murderer, even though he wasn't
Yep.
in a court of law. He wasn't convicted. He was,
Right.
arrested and arraigned. And
Was that hard for you guys to not have the trial?
well, for me, it's funny because my sister came over. She was crying. My sister Carol. She talks about that,
Mm-hmm.
and she says, "I talked to Jack, and he said it's okay," because I was like, "Carol, he died in jail." So all right,
Right.
we get a conviction. This is my take on it, and my family tends to agree with me. So you go through the court trial. We see horrible photos.
Mm-hmm.
We see the defense attorney is going to run Nancy through the mud.
Yeah.
Right? They always do. The victim is now somehow not the victim. They're the criminal.
Right.
Right? And so they say all these horrible things about, Nancy was an amazing person. Cece even told us, be prepared because it can be really brutal going through a trial.
Ugh.
Because they're going to run the victim through the ringer like they ain't an angel. They're not an angel. They're, look, you got to look at all this other stuff, that has nothing to do with it. It's a character attack.
Right.
Make the victim look bad. That makes the criminal, the actual person that did it, look not so bad.
Right. And they're not here to defend themselves.
They're not here to defend themselves. So you have that, and then the photos, and then you could get off. You can literally go through a trial.
Ugh.
There has been many, many families that go through a murder trial, and then on some technicality,
Right.
they get off because there's some law that there was and I wrote it in the book. There was a case in Hawaii only like 8 months before Nancy's that was dismissed because it was based on DNA, and they got it dismissed. So the guy walked free. He was already in jail though in Florida for another murder.
Oh,
They extradited him to Hawaii for this murder. They had the DNA, but here's the difference. That murder, this is what I understand after talking to our prosecuting attorney,
mhm.
Scott Bell, who's in that video as well. That DNA was touch point DNA.
Oh, I see.
So it's one thing to go into a crime scene and pull DNA off a doorknob
Mhm.
or off a dresser drawer or a nightstand or something. That's touch point DNA. They're getting good at grabbing that kind of DNA as well. But then the defense can go, well, so what? He was there.
Right,
Could have been there 3 weeks prior to the murder. He could have been there a month prior to the murder.
right.
DNA doesn't dissolve necessarily like that quickly. So you can't prove that he was in the room the moment the victim was murdered.
Ugh.
So you have to dismiss this case. And then they got it dismissed. So Scott was telling us he thinks this is more of an open and shut case because it's blood,
Mhm.
Nancy's blood, his blood on the same towels, on the same items in the apartment.
Right, on the towels.
You now have a timestamp that he was there at that DNA was there at that moment they were killed. It's much more difficult to walk the back out of that and try to walk that away,
Right.
and dismiss that. It's like, well, how did you happen to be there? It's one thing if it was just on that towel in the stairwell. He could have probably said, well, I cut myself and there was a towel, so I just picked it up and used it.
Right, I was at a different apartment.
But I wasn't up in the room. I wasn't up, but no, it was all over in the room too. We found that out. They didn't cover that in the video, People Magazine stuff, but it was on other towels in her apartment, other items in her apartment, on her clothes,
Yes.
things like that. So, yeah, he was there. It was him. And so, yeah, we were spared a lot by not going through trial. And like I told my family, what's the goal of that? The goal is he gets convicted. All right. So now you got a piece of paper filed in a filing cabinet that he's a murderer,
Right.
which doesn't really matter to me. We know he's the murderer.
Mhm.
And you got a judge that throws down a hammer and says, guilty. Well, okay,
Yes.
that's fine and dandy. But the goal is he spends the rest of his life in prison. Well, he did some of his life. Once he was caught, he spent the rest of his life in prison. He was behind bars for
Right?
something like 15 months. So we got that justice. And we did not have to go through the negative side of the trial and all that crap and maybe getting it dismissed.
Mhm.
So it was really a blessing. And I explained that to a couple of family members. They all tend to agree very, very strongly. Oh, yeah. And then Cece was talked to our family. You guys really missed a horrible thing. I think it's great. This probably ended up as best it can ever end.
Wow.
And Scott told us directly, and he even covered it on the People Magazine thing.
Mhm.
We can clearly state right now that based on overwhelming genetic evidence, he was the murderer.
Right.
Just like Nancy's not here to defend himself, he's not here to defend himself, but based on the evidence, he killed her. We can say that
Right.
without getting sued, without
Right.
getting his
Right,
family
right.
coming at us. Well, then tell me another scenario that makes more sense because he was there.
Mhm.
He never denied it. And then the strange things he did after he got caught,
Yes.
that was weird for us because, like I share with you, we never saw the body cam video until we watched the People Magazine Investigates episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were like, "Is this what? Is this a reenactment?" And then we saw, then they showed his face, and we're like, "Oh my god,
It was him.
that's real. That's him. That's what he was saying when they arrested. He about crapped his. You could tell he was crapping his pants
Oh, absolutely.
when they came to the store. He was crapping his pants, like,
Is trying so hard not to give them his DNA.
yeah. He was caught. And
He
that's why
was.
he did the work. By the way, they didn't cover this. I'll share this with you. It's in my book. Oh, it's in my book. He gave away his car title. They mentioned that in People Magazine. It was to a girl named Gloria. His next door neighbor, her first name was Gloria.
Oh,
And she lived at 222.
you're kidding.
He was in apartment 221. Yeah, it's in my book. I wrote it in my book. She was in apartment 222. And Nancy was killed in 2222 Aloha Drive. This lady he gave his last possessions to was the next door neighbor, probably a friend of his or a neighbor that he
Mhm.
could get along with or whatever. And she was at 222. So we found that interesting.
All the 2 connection is so interesting to me.
Yeah, there's so many of those in this story.
Mhm.
Yeah, they just keep flooding us. And there's a lot of spiritual connections for the family going all the way back to when our dad died. We just get these things. And I think a lot of families have that. You hear that a lot when you lose a loved one.
Mhm.
Some of it is human nature. I think you're looking for those things. But for our family, there's too many unexplainable. I'm still asking a mathematician to tell me what the odds are. I want to know what the odds are of a pitcher falling the moment somebody's murdered. And that pitcher is not just a person that was murdered, it was the one that hung up that one photo. then add the math that, okay, that person hangs up 12 photos, every close family member, mom, dad, all the siblings.
Mm-hmm.
In the moment they're murdered, only their photo, no other photo, just their photo falls at the moment they're murdered. I mean,
And it wasn't the top or bottom or the middle.
yeah,
It's truly something extra.
I covered it in the book. So my photo, kind of funny because I watched the People magazine investigate. They reenacted
Mm-hmm.
that photo wall. At one shot, they show my photo in the top right corner. Nancy's in the top left corner. I'm in the top right. And in another scene, they show it again. I'm in the bottom right. The actual one, I was in the
Oh,
bottom right. That's where my friend, his pool stick hit by my photo.
oh, wow.
He hit by my photo and Nancy's photo falls. I'm standing to his left. Our backs are to that wall. So her photo is like on my right shoulder.
Okay.
And I recall it not just sliding down the wall. If it did that, it would hit two other photos, knock them down.
Right.
It jumped off the wall. Then the part of that is physics. This is paneling back in the day,
Sure.
and there's 2x studs, so you hit one place and another place it pops out.
Mm-hmm.
But her picture jumped off the wall. That's how I describe it. It didn't just fall off the wall. It jumped off the wall and shattered on the ground.
That gives me chills.
Yeah, and we felt this rush come through us. Everybody there, my friend, my brothers, their friends, my mom was there.
And you said your mom wasn't even looking that direction and still knew somehow.
No, she was sewing. My sister says that she was crocheting. I always say she was sewing something by hand because I could, being a 12-year-old boy,
Yeah.
I don't know.
What's the difference?
I don't know. Are you darning socks or are you
Yeah.
are you sewing a suit? I have no idea what you're just
Right.
needles. There's needles involved. That's all I know.
Right.
There's cloth and needles. And that's about the extent of my knowledge of all that stuff. Anyway, so yeah, she was sewing something by hand. Her back was to the wall. She screams out Nancy's name. So what are the mathematical odds of all that? And this is what I struggled with for many, many years. It's astronomical.
Yep. That's the word I was thinking. Astronomical.
That's all I can tell you. It's astronomical. It is not a coincidence. I am
No.
thoroughly, thoroughly convinced that was absolutely no coincidence there at all. There was something,
Mm-mm.
we were being forewarned that something's not right. Be prepared. It's like a bell tolling, where they say the bell tolls for no man or whatever.
Yeah.
It was a sign,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a very prophetic sign. I tell people it's okay to struggle with faith and struggle with the spiritual world. I think that's okay. Struggle with it. I do
Mm-hmm.
believe in God. I believe in a creator. I believe that there's something beyond this physical world. I believe that God is okay with people struggling with it because
I like that.
that's how he sometimes brings people to himself, is to get them to struggle, question it. It's okay to question things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because questioning it means you're searching.
Yep.
And if you're searching for the truth. And if you really want the truth, you do have to search for it. And anyway, that's how I feel about it. And I've seen a very significant proof that there is a spiritual world. It was absolute proof to me that there's no question. I can't question that part of it, that there is a spiritual world. And then you have to get into, well, what does that mean? Okay, well, what does it mean? All right, struggle with that.
Yes. And as soon as you think you know one, you're moving on to the next.
That's okay. That's part of being human.
Yeah.
And that's why it was also for me, I was very impressionable. I was 12 years old. I was 12 going on 13.
Your birthday was in January, right?
January, yeah. And my sister Nancy was 12 going on 13 when our dad died. So we had a lot in common at certain points in our life.
Oh.
And I was the one that shut the glass door on her friend in Michigan in 1970, right? Her friend Marty.
Yeah. Can you tell that story?
Yeah. So before we moved to Colorado, we didn't even know we're moving to Colorado. This is still in the winter, and I can't tell the date. Marty couldn't remember the exact date. I can't remember the exact date.
Mm-hmm.
I just know it was the winter before their graduation, which was 1970, I believe.
71?
70 or 71, yeah. It's in the
Okay.
book. The dates are in the book. But anyways, so they went out. Marty knows why they went out. She'll tell people, we went out because we had to look in this van. We left something in there. She knows exactly why they walked out the back patio door. For me, it's always, Nancy and Marty walked out the back patio door to check on something. That's how I do it because in my 10, 11-year-old brain, that's all I comprehended.
Right.
All I know is I walked by the door, this patio door. It was open. It was open quite a bit. It was one of those slider doors. So it was a glass door. And back in the day, they did not have safety glass on all the windows and doors.
Oh,
Safety glass came into play in doors and windows. And even to this day, I think you'll find some doors and windows without safety glass. I think in some cases it's an OSHA requirement, because people get cut,
right.
get hurt. But back then, I know for a fact it was not safety glass. It was, standard glass. So I shut the door. It was freezing. I mean, this is a Michigan, cold, dark Michigan winter. And I'm a little skinny kid. And I walk by, what is this door doing open? It's freezing out. The wind is kind of blowing. It had a little bit of a breeze coming in.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, it's cold out there. I'm shutting the door. It was the right thing to do, the practical thing to do. So I shut the door.
Yes.
And then, go into the kitchen, probably get something to eat or whatever. And then, we all hear the big shattering of glass. And Marty walked through the door and she got severely cut. And I remember one of my uncles or my grandpa came over and boarded up the window or put a big piece of plywood over the door
Yeah.
to keep the wind, keep the snow and cold from coming in. I had to clean up that glass, and Nancy took her to the emergency room. She had to get a lot of stitches.
Oh my gosh.
We were in Hawaii in November presenting the artwork that I mentioned to the Hawaii police.
Yes, it's beautiful.
She was showing Scott Bell, the prosecuting attorney, the scars on her arms. Because Scott asked her, so do you still have those scars from when Jack shut the door on you? She goes, yeah, they're right here. She said, so that's embarrassing for me, but it's kind of, that's,
You're like, I was 10.
yeah. When she reminded me of that story, and we connected, I talk about it in the book, we reconnected in the
2017, I think.
something like that. And she reminded me, you were the one that shut the door on me. I go, oh, yeah, I did do that. That's right, I did.
Oh,
But it's one of those things I kind of put out of my mind. I go, yeah, I remember, you now that you say that, I absolutely did shut that door on you. Felt bad about that.
Yes.
I forgot about it, but I felt bad about that.
Yeah.
So I wrote that in the story. I go, do you mind me writing it? She goes, not at all. I go, because it ties into some other things I need to talk about. Because I've started writing this book when we connected. And so she let me do that. But I found it interesting that I shut the glass door on her friend. She walks through the glass door and gets severely cut.
Right.
Fast forward now, my friend bumps the wall next to the pool table with all 12 photos, and Nancy's picture falls at my feet and shatters glass.
Wow.
I find that very spiritual significance.
Yeah.
I tried to write not too much into that. I let people figure that out for themselves. But there's what are the odds of all that? And by the way, like when I researched what broken glass means, some people believe it means there's change coming. There's a significant change coming in your life.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And right after that, right after Marty got cut, in the next couple of months, we got into spring. And then in late spring, my mom went to Colorado, visited Colorado. My brother was going to college there.
Oh, okay.
Fell in love with the mountains and the sunshine. Came back home that summer and said, we're all moving to Colorado. And we did.
What did you guys think about that?
It was hard because our whole life was there. All of us had a lot of friends. I had my friends that were good friends. And we had a lot of cousins, a lot of aunts and uncles, grandparents.
Oh, yeah.
Our family goes back to before the Civil War.
Oh, my goodness.
One of my great grandfathers fought in the Civil War. He was in the, people laugh when I say this. My son and daughter give me a hard time about this because it's like the old guy in me. But he was in I believe it was the 4th Michigan Cavalry. And they were the ones that were chasing Jefferson Davis at the end of the Civil War to arrest him. He was trying to escape to South America, who was the president of the Confederacy.
Oh, my goodness.
The 4th Michigan Cavalry is the one that caught up with him. My grandpa wasn't involved directly in that. He got in one of the last battles. He had a bayonet wound that he ended up,
oh my goodness,
in the early 1900s, ended up dying of complications from that wound. But they're again all back in Michigan, all back in our area there in Michigan, our hometown of Bay City. So we had a long, rich history there, lots of friends. And here my mom, her dad passed away. My mom has 10 kids and she's moving all 9 of us. My brother Mike's already there on her own. They basically packed up a U-Haul truck in our car and we just moved to this unknown place with no friends, no family, kind of a little bit what Nancy did. We just took a chance and we went out there and it was good. Once we got there, we love the mountains. We love the sunshine. It's a little bit different weather. If you've been to Colorado compared to Michigan, we live right off the lake. Bay City's right on one of the Great Lakes.
Oh, okay.
And when the wind picks up off those lakes and when it's,
Oh,
you know, whatever below zero, it's the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life is the snow effect, by the way. And that is when you see stars in the sky and there's no clouds, just a beautiful starry night, and it's snowing
oh my word.
because the wind picks the moisture up off the Great Lakes and throws it up in the air and it snows.
Wow.
So you can see the stars in the sky and you see snow coming down. It's the most beautiful, crazy thing. Colorado doesn't have that.
That's amazing.
Colorado, there's no big lakes like that, that are, you don't get that,
Right.
at least not where we were. And when the sun comes out, it could be Colorado's a different winter. And at least where we lived, we were in Arvada, Colorado, which is west of Denver.
Okay.
And the winters there, it's snow, maybe overnight, and you wake up, wow, great, yay, there's snow. And as a kid, great, go play in the snow.
Yay.
By the afternoon, you're wearing a short sleeve shirt and the sun's
Oh,
out and there's snow on the ground. I mean, because it's warm. I mean, it could be
right.
kind of nice. Sometimes it'd be cold, but there are times where that sun would come out and you'd be like, wow, this is kind of cool. I don't need a coat right now,
Yeah. Especially as a teen.
but there's snow on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just a different life and a different experience. And in that respect, it was really good for us. It was a fresh start. I think we needed that.
Yeah.
I think our mom knew that we all needed that. She needed that.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, she ended up getting remarried when I was 16,
Okay.
which I was extremely happy. Really great man. Another World War II veteran. Really great
Wow.
guy. Couldn't ask for a
Oh,
better
I'm
stepdad.
glad.
Oh, yeah. So she did get a second chance in life, but she did raise her 10 kids alone for many years before she
Right.
remarried. It was about 10 years between when my dad died and when she got remarried. She focused on her kids. She took care of us. That was her priority.
She sounds like Superwoman.
She's the bravest person I've ever known because I don't think I could do that. If I had 10 kids and I lost my wife,
Oh,
I don't know if I
yeah.
could move across the country and not know anybody and just go move.
No, so intimidating.
She just had faith and that things would work out. And for the most part, they did. Other than losing our sister Nancy,
Mm-hmm.
it was a great experience and it was a good positive thing that we moved
Good.
there. But yeah, this whole thing, I got to a point in my life where I started writing. I'll just talk a little bit about the Brittle Riddle book I wrote.
Yes, please.
I started writing back, I think even when I went to meet the police in like 94 or 6, whenever I went back there,
Oh my goodness.
I started writing like a paragraph, a thought, a memory,
Mm-hmm.
just pieces, right?
Right.
And I would write them and I put them in a file. And as I got new computers, I transfer this file from one to another,
Mm-hmm.
newer computer,
Yep.
for decades. And I started compiling just these thoughts and had the basis of a little bit, some little stories going on in there. They weren't connected yet. It didn't have any, it was not a story. It was just a collection of feelings and thoughts
Memories or
and
uh-huh.
memories. Yeah. Then when I got Cece involved, once she replied and said, I want to help your family.
I love that she wrote you back same day, by the way.
Oh, yeah, yeah. She right away. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh. I had to get the whole family on the phone. So you won't believe this. We've got what I believe is we hit the jackpot when it comes to genetic genealogists. We got probably one of the best. There are some really great genetic genealogists. There's another woman, and I can't remember her name, and I need forgiveness on this. She's the one that solved the Golden State Killer.
Mm.
I met her at the
Yes.
genetic genealogist conference. Another amazing. A lot of.
Oh, that's cool.
I was hugging genetic genealogists at that conference. I kept telling them the superheroes because it's like
Oh,
they don't
yes.
realize what they're doing for these families. Some of them kind of do it from a scientific approach or from a law approach
Mm-hmm.
or helping the police, but they never got to see it from a family's first perspective. And that's what CC wanted us to be at that conference in February of the IG4 conference in San Diego in February.
Oh, yeah. I watched your family's video on that.
Yeah, yeah. So we went there, very emotional. I was
Yeah.
a little too emotional, I think. But anyways, we were honored to be able to talk to them. But they gave us a standing ovation. I guess it was the second standing ovation they've ever had in the something like 10 years they've been doing this conference.
Oh my goodness.
And I've had a lot of those genealogists come up to me later on and say, one of them said, I was thinking of quitting. I'm learning this. I'm a student and I'm learning this out.
Oh,
But after hearing you guys talk and what this means to families, she goes, I'm staying in this. This is what I want to do.
oh my goodness.
So meant a lot, right? I mean, you can impact people
Right.
because it is. They're superheroes. They're like I wrote in the book.
Yep.
We got to a point where it was more almost as important to know who did not murder Nancy as who did, because
Hmm.
how we're trying to live life, and you're always suspecting: is it this neighbor? Is it this friend of Nancy? Is it this old boyfriend of Nancy's? Is it this old
Right.
acquaintance? This
Hmm.
roommate? Whatever. And
Right.
everyone. And
Everyone.
so it's nice to see none of those people. Great. At least if we, that's why I wrote that part, that even if we got to that point, it's none of these people that we ran through all the gauntlet of scenarios in our mind. Well, at least we know it's not them. So we can stop that. We can stop those
Right.
scenarios. They never end. You're not at peace with it, right? So you never end the scenarios. You're constantly
Right.
running the scenarios over and over and adding things to the scenarios, adding new a little tidbit of information or whatever, or what about this or what about that?
Hmm.
And it can be very unsettling to not get to that point where you can go, okay, it's none of these people. That's good.
Right.
That's why I started writing this book once Cece got involved. I felt there's a high probability there's going to be an end to the story. So that's why I wanted to complete it. And my family contributed
Yeah.
their stories into this story. I think it came out okay. It was what I wanted to write.
I loved it.
A lot of it was the perspective, as you could tell, of a 6-year-old boy. Of course, 60-year-old man's writing it from my 6-year-old. Like they say, when you lose somebody, like we lost Nancy, we lost our dad when I was 6, we lost Nancy when I was 12, going on 13. I will always be 12 going on 13 when I think of Nancy. I will always be that 6-year-old going on 7-year-old
Hmm.
boy when I think about my dad, because I have no other way to relate to those people other than through
Right.
those eyes and those memories and that perspective. I can't even comprehend relating to Nancy today. I didn't,
Oh.
you know, I didn't know her
Right.
like that. And
Hmm.
and I hear that a lot from people that lost people that are close to them. But yeah, and then when I wrote the book and it was done, I asked CC, I don't want to profit from this. That's not the point of the story. I want to get the story out. My family wanted to get the story out. I had a lot of people, when I tell people about this story, it always, kind of like you mentioned, it sends a shiver up your spine when you hear about the
Yeah.
glass and the photo falling and all that stuff. And if someone
Hmm.
once told me, and
Oh, I like that.
so I thought, okay, let's get this thing written. I'm not a writer, but I'll do my best. I kind of thought, okay, I'll be the narrator. I'm going to bring the reader through this through
Yeah.
my perspective. I can't bring them through the eyes of, I can bring the stories in from my brothers and sisters, but I can't write it directly from their perspective because I can't do that. So I can write it from
Right.
as a narrator. I would be not only involved in the story, but write it as a narrator. So that's what I did. But I asked CC when it was all done, I don't want to profit. Who do you recommend we could give the proceeds to? And that's when she goes, aha, we just opened this new database, this DNA database.
DNA
Because and I'll share a
database.
quick story, and I know you got to go, but I want to share this quick story. So we got CC
Oh,
involved.
I could chat all day.
Okay, we got CC involved. We did not cover this part, by the way, on People Magazine. We got CC involved, and then she contacted me maybe a month later, and she goes, I want to give you some kind of not too good news. I go, oh no, what?
Oh.
She goes, all these databases are shutting down because 23andMe, GenMatch, I
Hmm.
believe GenMatch did, maybe not GenMatch, but I know 23andMe and Ancestry.com shut down their data access to genetic genealogists and law enforcement because the users that submitted their DNA never had a box to check to say, I allow
Right.
law enforcement to use my DNA. So they immediately froze all the access to that. So it delayed us about a year and a half.
Oh my gosh.
And until they got enough people that checked those boxes, and it had to be like, I think she mentioned you have to have like 1 million data points. So you have to have like 1 million random DNA submittals. So you have these data
Gotcha.
points you can grab from. So there's a significant amount to be able to do the
Right.
work they need to do. But because of that delay, we did not get the conviction that we probably would have got. I now look back at that and go, that was a year and a half. We could have been a year and a half
Right.
ahead.
Right.
He may have still died in jail, of course, but
Right.
there would have been time for him to go through court, the trial process.
Hmm.
So I was like, that's perfect. We wanted to donate to DNA Justice. That's going to be our cause. DNA Justice is a database built by genetic genealogists for genetic genealogists, to help the law enforcement, to keep the costs down for law enforcement. And
Yes.
it's not a corporate driven database built for the purpose of finding your ancestry or finding your medical
Right.
history. It is built to solve crimes. So it's a purpose-built database specifically for genetic genealogists to solve these crimes. And there's no corporate entity that's going to come in and say, well, there's now a new politically correct thing that we need to add a checkbox to, this law that was passed somewhere. So we're shutting you down again.
Right.
So by having this database, they're still going to continue, of course, to use all the databases they can.
Yes, but just in case.
But just in case, it makes sense for them to have this database. So I can only recommend to you or your listeners, if they want to help solve crimes, go to DNA Justice and look at what they have to offer. You simply take the DNA that you've already submitted to another database and you upload it to them. You can download it from Ancestry.com or 23andMe. You can download your DNA and then upload it to DNA Justice. And they'll take your data and then they'll be able to do the good work that they're doing.
And they're a nonprofit?
They're nonprofit, yes.
Trying to keep it free or low cost?
Yeah, it's a 501c entity. But also, your readers also need to know it cuts both ways. They're finding people that were imprisoned that are innocent through DNA.
Yes.
And they're finding people that are guilty and putting them in prison. That's the beauty of DNA. I mean, I've become a big fan of the DNA technology and what it can do for everyone is it's solving these crimes. You want these people off the street as a society. You can't have these people that have something built into them that killing is okay. Killing is just okay. I just have, however they want to justify it.
Right.
You just can't have them. If they killed somebody you love, you don't want them to kill somebody else. Right. But society, is all societies have to cope with that and deal with it and come up with the right solution. So it's a really good justice. It's a good tool for justice because it's cutting both ways, freeing the people that are innocent.
I hadn't really thought about it the other way before I read your book. And that's been on my mind all week, helping people that have been falsely imprisoned.
Yeah.
Too.
I mean, there's an injustice. You don't want them doing time for something they truly didn't do. And if DNA can prove without a doubt that, it wasn't them, it was somebody else, then hooray. Everybody wins, that's the right thing to do. So we're really proud of DNA Justice and the work that they're doing. It's a pretty amazing program and we're just glad to be involved in it. You'll find the book there as well under how there's a support tab. The Brittle Riddle is there where people can go grab the book and they'll see that all the proceeds go to DNA Justice. Yeah, it's been our honor to do this, to get Nancy's story out there, to honor Nancy, to honor our family, and to help other people, to help other families that find themselves in a similar situation, and to help law enforcement. All I can tell people is if you go have a tragedy in your life, if you can find a way, and I can't, everyone's different, everyone has all kinds of scenarios, but if you can ever find a way to turn that into something good, more power to you, do it. It's so healing. It's so healing to honor that person and to do something good with that. My mom, at one point, she planted a tree in Nancy's honor. That was good. Plant a tree. Plant some flowers. Go work in a soup kitchen or whatever you feel like you need to do to honor that person. My mom taught us one thing for sure. And this was after losing our dad and our sister. When you don't focus on yourself, focus on other people. That's how you heal. That's the best thing you can do to heal. Is you don't make this about you. If you wallow in the sorrow and you wallow in the grief for too long, there's a grief process. You have to go through it. But at some point, focus on other people. It gets your mind off yourself. And when you get your mind off yourself and put it on other people and helping other people, it's so healing. It's so liberating. You're free. You're free of that.
I love that.
It's just a good thing.
That was one of the quotes I wrote down from your book, from your mom, that get back after life brings you to your knees to focus on others as a remedy to resolve our own internal pain.
Yep. Yeah. I remember, I did write this in that book, but I remember going through Nancy's funeral. And there again, it was like same church, same people in the pews. That's not when my dad died 6 years earlier. It's like everybody took their place. Everybody was sitting almost in the same seats, at least in my young memory. That's how I remember it. I'm sure it wasn't exactly like that, but it sure seemed like that to me. It was just a repeat. And a lot of families have experiences like that. Death is a part of life. Unfortunately, if you live long enough, you're going to experience it with somebody close sooner or later, right? I mean, That's just part of life. But I remember then we had a private service after the church service. We went to the graveyard, and that's where Nancy was buried next to my dad. And we're grieving alone, just the family, in front of my dad's grave and my sister's grave. And, being a 12-year-old boy and having her picture fall off that wall, crash, shatter at my feet, and how she died, and to go through this again. And, my mom's grieving. You don't want to see your mother grieve. You don't want to see your brothers and sisters grieve, and you're grieving. I was so angry. And that's where I vowed to God, I will find this guy. I didn't make a public declare of that. I didn't go out on the highest
Right.
mountain and, proclaim
Like
this.
shout
I
it.
didn't proclaim it to
Yeah.
anybody. I just vowed to myself and to God and to Nancy that something has to be done. We can't just
Yeah.
sit back. I don't want this to happen to somebody else. I don't want this to be another. I don't want this to happen. There again, at this point in time, because we don't know who did it, I wrote about this, that it's like a terrorist attack. You don't know if it's going to continue its
Right.
rampage on others in the family. Am I going to lose another sister?
Right.
Am I going to lose my mom?
Oh,
Am I going to lose a brother?
that's terrifying.
Yeah, you kind of have those fears and those thoughts, and because you don't know who this is. Also, I wouldn't want it to happen to anyone else's girlfriend or daughter or mother.
Right. Right.
Nancy was a beautiful, vibrant, full of life person. And one last thing I'll say about all this, the odds of her being alive today, I can honestly say were extremely good because she came from a
Right.
family of 10 kids and all of us are still here. So medically,
Yeah.
from a DNA perspective, she had a very good chance of being around today and having kids and grandkids. Right? I mean,
Right.
it's not like we have a big heavy history of cancer or something that was going
Mm-hmm.
to take her out no matter what. She would, her odds
Right.
of living just weren't going to be that great. No, they were pretty good that she would live a long life. And so that was kind of stolen, right? That was stolen from
Mm.
her for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But anyway, so yeah, I'm glad I wrote the book. I'm glad that Cece had this cause, this worthy cause that fit right with what we want to
Yes.
do. And we feel good about that. We don't have to leave this as a tragedy, even though it is. We can do something good with it.
Right. Absolutely.
And yeah, I feel really good about that.
I love that. And I'll link to DNA Justice and Squadron posters, the link to buy the book.
My son started this company, and I'm the owner. We do military art. We have like over 4,000 prints, squadronposters.com. We do artwork down to the unit level. So we go down to the squadron, battalion, company, ship level. We do all branches of service. We do first responders. We're licensed. We're officially licensed with all the branches of service, like the Air Force and the Marine Corps and the
That's
Navy.
great.
We're officially licensed with entities like the Civil Air Patrol and most of the aircraft manufacturers like Lockheed Martin, Bell Helicopter, Sikorsky, and all those people. Textron and all these people. So it makes our artwork authorized and authentic. And the units, a lot of the units come in commission artwork. We have a non-profit commissioning process that they can partake in. And they basically tell us what they want in the art, and then we complete it for them. And yeah, it's been an honor to do that. So after 20 years in the military, and then to get involved in this. So with that in mind, when we went to Hawaii here a couple months ago, November, I
Nice.
decided, because that's when we were meeting with the police, Carol and I, and Marty and Sandy, her two of her best friends. This was November 26th, 2024. I decided, well, if we're going there to honor the police and to thank them, and I had a copy of books for all of them that I handed out. We got to do artwork. So I had my company, I commissioned artwork. So because we do first responder artwork, of course we have to get their permission because we're using their logo.
Right.
It's a copyrighted logo, and that's part of these licenses. So they gave us permission to use their logo, and so we created the art. They approved it. I was working just with their marketing people, their public relations side of the Honolulu Police Department. Once they approved it, I had it printed and it was waiting for us when we went there, kept it under wraps, and then we revealed it to the police department while we were there. It was an honor. And like I mentioned, we have a Facebook page, it's the Brittle Riddle.
The Brittle Riddle.
You search for that on Facebook, you'll find it. All these stories. So it's our way to keep the story straight, to add these other things. The artwork that we gave the police and the picture of Nancy falling, her graduation picture, are what I call the bookends of this story. Because
I love that.
Yeah, the artwork was printed, by the way, of all places, our printing facility is in Colorado. even though I'm not living in
Okay.
Colorado anymore. We print out of Colorado,
Yeah.
and it does not have glass. So it's kind of interesting because I told them, if this falls off your
Yep.
wall, there's no glass to break, so no worries. You know,
We're not
because
shattering.
yeah, they just thought, wow, that's crazy. Because
Wow.
there's it was great for us to bring this to a closure in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
To meet with CC at the Genetic Genealogy Conference, and then in November to meet with the Honolulu Police and give them some artwork and copies of the book and thank them for all they did.
Wow.
They did a great job too, by the way.
Yeah.
They never gave up. They were always there for us,
No.
answering questions. And we would call them sometimes a lot and email them a lot.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it was just the same questions, just bugging them again. And a lot of times
Mm.
it was just to move them forward. We would
Right.
pressure them. We would put on a pressure campaign to get them cold case unit, which they were probably going to do anyways. We were just one of those encouraging voices that, yeah,
Right.
yeah, let's do this. Go for it.
You've got this.
We need that. Yeah, we need this. So it was an honor.
You mentioned in your book that one of the captains had Nancy's picture on his desk, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I love
During
that.
his time, there were over 50 years, of course, many people that rotated in and out of Nancy's case. But there was a 20-year
I'm
period
sure.
where it was on no one's desk. And then there was another period for several years
Oh.
where it was on no one's desk. So what happens is
Mm-hmm.
they open it like it was opened when she was killed. It was an
Mm-hmm.
active case for I don't know how many months, maybe let's say 6 months or whatever, and then they have nothing else to go
Okay.
on, so they close it. It doesn't mean they can't reopen it.
Ugh.
It just means they
Right.
have other things to do. There's other crimes.
Right.
They can't put resources on this for 50 years all on itself. There's got to be a reason for them to go back and look at it and apply
Right.
resources again. So there was big gaps of decades in some cases where
Right.
there was nothing to do. And but they did their job well when they were doing it. It was always good. It was
Mm-hmm.
always communicating very well with us. They were very kind with us. They did everything we asked them to do, and they preserved that evidence. They collected all the evidence, even though they
Oh,
didn't know what DNA was.
remarkable.
They preserved it well.
Right.
I'll share one little side story.
Please.
This thread that Nancy, her way it got solved, there's a thin thread, like a needle in a thread, right? This thread was so
Okay.
fine and so thin, and it weaves over 50 years. There's so many little stories. I could tell you so many stories that any point in time that thread could have been broken and we'd be done.
Right.
So they collected the towels, they put them in these bags. They were mainly paper. I think they had a little clear window on them, but they were evidence bags. But because they were paper, that preserved the DNA. That helped instead of plastic. I guess plastic
Wow.
could get moisture and it could maybe deteriorate the DNA.
Right.
So they did that well. Back in the day, they must have known enough about that, whether they're thinking about DNA, just
Mm-hmm.
the blood evidence, just the evidence itself.
How to preserve
Yeah,
it.
they preserved it well.
Right.
At one point, and I want to say this is probably 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, their evidence room had a flood and a lot of evidence got destroyed.
Oh my gosh.
But Nancy's evidence was on a shelf that was high enough, the flood did not touch it. So
Oh,
that thread
thank
could have been
goodness.
broken right there, because if that would have gotten damaged, they could have either thrown it out or said it's no good. It's contaminated or it's
Right.
defective or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that thread just kept winding through this story. There's many of those instances that,
Like a yellow brick road.
yeah, just crazy things like that we had to encounter.
That is amazing that it was flooded and hers was high enough that it was able to
Yeah,
come back into play.
yeah. And I didn't write about that in the story. There's a lot of things I didn't put into the story that I wrote because I wanted to move the reader through it, because you can get
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of rabbit holes, and I didn't want to take them to
I'm sure.
too many of our what ifs and too many of our scenarios that we were worrying about. Or like I didn't write about checking this guy that was in prison, taking his DNA. It happened.
Right.
It's true, but I didn't find it. I didn't find a place to put it in there. It just didn't flow.
Yeah.
It was
Right.
too many detours that I felt the story needed. I wanted to be true to the storyline, and that's why I think People Magazine also did a good job. They didn't talk about Colorado at all. They talked about like Nancy
Mm-mm.
moving from Michigan directly to Hawaii. That's why the timing
Right.
of her picture. It was late that evening. If it was already dark out when we were playing pool. You know how your kids on a weekend, You stay out,
Yeah,
right, a little
yeah,
bit
Friday
later.
night.
You stay out a little bit past dark, but you have to be home by usually parents by gotta be home by 10 o'clock. You know,
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
those things. Neighborhood kids.
I was trying to figure out that time from Michigan to Hawaii, so it
Yeah,
makes more
much more
sense in
sense. Colorado.
Colorado.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And that was based on the information they gave us at that time too.
Okay.
I think the timeline shifted slightly as they figured out more later on in time in the 2000s.
Oh, interesting.
Here's one story I'll share with you that People magazine didn't cover, that my book doesn't cover.
Oh,
We always thought Nancy, these salesmen left, right? These knife salesmen leave, which is another thing.
mhm.
What are the odds of a knife salesman? Wesley
I can't
husband.
get over that either.
Yeah. And by the way, she met them. So if you've ever been to Waikiki, they have a lot of these open air markets.
Yeah.
I think she met them at an open air market and they were just one of the booths. And they're like, hey, sign up here for a demonstration and you get a free gift, right? And then she got a pie cutter
Yes.
for listening to their spiel.
Gotcha. Like a enter to win.
Yeah, nowadays it's the timeshares.
Yeah.
Everyone they want to sell you a timeshare, right? So this is
Yep.
kind of the same deal, or Tupperware, or one of those things.
Sure.
So they had an appointment. They changed the appointment to later, about an hour later. The appointment got shifted, or
Oh,
or actually it was an hour sooner. I think it was an hour sooner because somebody canceled.
okay.
That's what it was, an hour sooner. So they did the presentation, leave, and that's when Jody Spooner goes into her room 10 minutes or 20 minutes after they leave. She hears Nancy's water running. She goes to sleep. Well, we now know, we found this out only a couple of years ago,
Oh,
right? Maybe it was only a year ago.
oh my goodness.
It was around the time that he died in prison that prosecuting attorney Scott Bell shared this with us
Mhm.
that, or maybe it was the police. Anyways, they now know Nancy left the apartment. So I think Nancy turned her water off, left the apartment, and she went to a bank. We knew she went to a bank.
Yeah.
She opened up a bank account, another bank account.
So she already had one, and that was a second bank account?
We can't put that together. We just know, I think she had one before. We don't know where that one was.
Oh,
But we do know that she opened up a brand new bank account that day. She paid money
wow.
orders that day. She got paid that day. I
Okay.
tracked her movements. I was able to, when I went there, I knew she bought money orders. I knew she went to the bank. I knew she paid her bills. I
Mhm.
knew she got her paycheck at the restaurant she worked at.
Mhm.
But we never knew. We thought she did that earlier in the day. Well, she did most of that earlier in the day.
Oh,
But we didn't know we thought she opened the bank account at that same time. Well, come to find out, the money orders and I believe the bank account were opened up after the salesman leave. She leaves the apartment. So that was news. That was shocking news to us
wow.
because now we know she left, went to the bank, came back, and then went up in her room. And the water running, we believe, was when Tudor, after he killed her, he went and grabbed towel, right? He cut himself. I think he's trying to wash the blood
Right.
off his hands, blood all over the bathroom. She was, by the way, killed in her bedroom, not in the bathroom.
Right.
And that's when he grabbed the towels and ran down some flights of stairs and did not take the elevator. He took the stairs just so he wouldn't be seen.
Wow. So the water wasn't on that whole time.
Yeah. Now get this.
Hmm.
We did know that one of the neighbors in an adjoining building next to Nancy's building,
Uh,
around the time right before Nancy was murdered, a car pulled up and a man was yelling at a woman profanely,
oh.
yelling at a woman. I mean, nasty names and yelling, that she could hear. She went out on her balcony and could hear this argument going on. Went back in, washed dishes or whatever, and then looked back out
Mhm.
and saw that they were gone. So it is very possible that, whatever this relationship was with Tudor,
Mhm.
that he was the one that was yelling at this girl because she knew it was a girl and a man, and that the man was yelling at the lady or at the girl, and they disappeared. Or whether they went up, she didn't know if they went up into the apartment or
Right.
what, but they were just not out there yelling anymore, or he
Wow.
wasn't out there yelling at her. So it's possible that Tudor, however he knew Nancy, saw Nancy coming back from the bank or gave her a ride to the bank. I don't know. See, we don't
Oh,
know, right?
right.
He had a car. We do know he had a car. Most of Nancy's friends, I think all of Nancy's friends, did not have cars. Her roommate did not have a car. Nancy's roommate's boyfriend did not have a car. No one had a car that we know of because they were all young kids.
Right.
And in Waikiki, a car is expensive, in the early
Right.
70s.
I
and you
bet.
could walk everywhere. She walked to the bank. She walked to the Waikiki. She walked
To
for
work.
job and church. There's a church there she went to.
Wow.
It was a small world, and they all walked around. So we don't know. Did he give her a ride to the bank
Interesting.
and back? It wasn't that far. She could easily walk there because it was down the canal. It's at the end of the canal.
Did I read it took about 10 minutes to walk to the bank?
I would say 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think if that was him yelling at her, that he could have followed her upstairs?
That's where I get into speculation.
Right.
So we believe Nancy would not have let him up there if he was trying to make advances at her and she did
hmm
not want anything to do with him.
Right.
She would not have put herself in that situation. So that leads me to believe there's something else going on there that I can't put my finger on. I don't know what
Mm.
it is. And I'm hoping somebody out there that knew of Brittle Riddle back in
Yeah.
1972 in Hawaii, a
Yeah.
graduate assistant, professor's assistant at the University of Hawaii, which wasn't that far away from Waikiki and from where Nancy was.
Mm.
Somebody out there can answer that question. Well, I knew him. He was involved in this, or he knew these people, or yeah, I saw them together. I knew how they met. If anybody has information, the police would love to know.
Yes.
This guy's not going to be tried. There's no
Right.
there's no harm done in putting that information out there. No one needs to feel threatened. He's gone.
Helps the family understand.
Yeah, but it helps the family, and I think it helps the police. And not that he's going to be tried; it's all done.
Right.
But it is information that can help people, put those pieces together. We're not
hmm
holding our breath. I mean, we got the answer we wanted. We know who
Right.
did it. The why question, if that ever comes, great. If it doesn't come, I'm not holding my breath.
Right.
It's one of those curiosity things, but it's not, like I said, there is no justification. So
No. No.
whatever reason he thought he had, to me, it's a dumb reason,
Absolutely.
right? It's just stupidity. And, you know, it's just, you let your emotions get to you to a point where you had to do something like this. It's not an
hmm
excuse. It's no reason, no
No.
justification.
No. Absolutely.
So, yeah,
Do you know if the police were able to talk to his ex-wife when they found out that it was him?
no,
Mm.
because his ex-wife was already dead.
Oh.
She died. Unfortunately, this is another one of those thin threads, the thin thread. She
hmm
died only about a year and a half, I believe, before we got Cece involved.
Oh.
And so it was like we missed that door, that window. She
Yeah.
may have known. I wouldn't doubt because he's married, right?
Right.
He's coming home after he
Yes.
kills Nancy. Probably has blood in the car. Probably has
Yep.
a cut hand, blood all over him.
Yep.
He's walking in the door. He lived in an apartment in another building about a mile away, I guess. I
Mm.
can only imagine if I came home to my wife and I had blood
Yeah.
all over a cut hand, she's going to go, "What in the world, has
Yeah.
happened?" And then
Right.
you're watching the news that night. A girl in Waikiki gets stabbed to death. We don't know who did it,
Yeah.
and
Two
I
miles
wouldn't
away
doubt
from.
if she either suspected it or even maybe confronted him, but he was pretty
hmm
violent. And just so
Right.
you know, she felt very threatened her whole life
Oh.
from this guy. She was afraid of him her whole life. We know that. I won't get into details, but
Or
um,
that's awful.
it is awful. So, yeah, he was not kind to her and did not treat her well, from what I hear.
Wow. That makes sense that his son was willing to give his DNA.
Yes, yes. He said he did. I'll share with what he told us because Carol and I did talk with him. Which, by the
Oh,
way,
wow.
he's also a hero. Yeah, the
Yeah.
prosecuting attorney Scott Bell talked to him, of course, because he
hmm
was involved in this case, because since he
Right.
volunteered to give his DNA, and asked him if he'd be willing to talk to the family. He agreed, so he set up a conference call between Carol and myself, his sister
Wow.
Carol and myself, and him. His name is John, really nice young man,
Mm.
and he is a hero. Anyone that contributes their DNA and helps solve a crime is also a hero. So not only genetic genealogists that are solving these crimes and the police that are solving these crimes, but those that volunteer their DNA and help solve a crime are heroes.
Absolutely.
It's an opportunity for people to be a hero,
hmm
help solve these crimes. So he did. And yeah, he told Carol and I did this as much or not just for your family, but as much or more for my own mother
Oh,
is how she was treated. And she lived in fear her whole life from this guy.
wow.
That's why he freely gave his DNA.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and those are some of those behind the scene things that no one really covers,
Yeah.
but it's the truth. And but John is an amazing young man, and that's why I had to write about DNA.
Hmm.
DNA is a physical thing, but the sins of the father does not carry over into DNA. We have free will,
Right.
and
Right.
each one of us every day have to wake up and decide if we're going to be good or bad. We're going to
Yep.
do the right thing or the wrong thing. Are we going to be kind or mean? Are we going to be positive or negative? That's our choices to make. That's not in your DNA. Some people probably argue that some of it is part of
Oh.
your DNA composition that may contribute to some of that.
Mm.
But I say at some point, it's not.
Yeah.
At
I,
some point, it's just simply your free will. We're
I
making decisions. It's our
I
choice.
tend to agree with you on that one.
Yep.
Wow.
So yeah, he's a hero. So yeah, it's been a long journey.
Yeah.
And that's why I had to, on my Facebook page, I had to put that picture of myself up at
I
12
love
and
that.
at
You're
60.
so cute.
Well, I mean,
I love seeing the comparison though.
kind of wrote this book from that perspective. I, you know,
Yes.
like I said, when I think of Nancy, I'm still 12. And because I never got to know her at 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever.
Mm,
And so I wrote this for that little boy as well. And, that's
mm,
still inside me.
yeah.
I wrote it for him and for my family. Anyway, so yeah, we got some justice. I feel good about that. And we're trying to make something good out of all of this. So that's all we can ask. So I don't mind talking to the media
Absolutely.
or to podcasts or,
Yeah.
you know, blog posts or whatever, because we didn't talk about anything publicly for almost 50 years. We did talk
Mm,
amongst ourselves. We had that luxury and that advantage and that privilege of having
right.
brothers and sisters to share with. It was like I wrote in the book, it's a very healing thing. And it was very, it's the word I used,
Therapeutic or
therapeutic. Yeah, it's therapy. So we had
yeah.
they didn't have therapists that came to your house when you lost somebody back in the
Mm,
day.
right.
A lot of police departments have those now. Well, they'll have child therapists. If it's a tragic event,
Right.
we didn't have that, but we did have each other. So that
Mm,
was huge.
that's
Yeah,
everything. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I don't want to keep it too long. I
No,
appreciate your time, and
thank you. I appreciate your time. I was really excited to get to hear from you and hear
yeah.
more about Nancy and
Well, we appreciate anyone that would take the time to cover the story, and we appreciate your. Yeah, I did find a couple, things like I mentioned. Our mom and dad,
yeah.
their name is Merle and
Yeah.
Thelma.
I
Other
think
than that, you guys did a great job.
some of that, is hard to find from
Right.
back then. It's easier to find, from the 2000s forward. So I really appreciate you
Sure.
sharing those
Yeah.
details.
Yeah. Thanks for
Uh,
covering her story. I like
yeah.
that you're keeping her memory in a positive way. She was a very positive and amazing, good
Sh-
person.
She
So
seemed
thank you.
incredible.
She
And
was
all the stories in your book, I mean, I highly recommend anybody listening to check out the Brittle Riddle to learn more about Nancy.
awesome.
Yeah.
There's a human interest out there on murders. People want to know these mysteries. It's an
Hmm.
intriguing thing. It's a human nature thing. I know that.
Hmm.
I lived it. We wanted answers, but
Yeah.
I do appreciate when the story, like Nancy's story, is being told well, and thank you for covering her in
Oh,
a very
thank you.
positive way. That means a lot to us.
Thank you. I
Like I
really
said, on our
appreciate that.
Facebook page, we'll take that and we'll repost it. So
Thank
I
you.
just started that Facebook page. We'll see if it becomes anything. But and by the way, last thing I'll say is
Well,
I may write a second edition to this story
you should.
because I now have other things to put in it. I have the genetic genealogist conference. I have the artwork we gave to the police. I have, the paddling out Hawaii 5 style in
Ooh,
the middle of the bay in Waikiki and laying those two lays.
excellent.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Jenna. You have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Bye now.
Bye. Thank you again so much to Jack. I'm so grateful for his time today. And I hope that you enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Crime Clueless. I really appreciate you spending your time with me as we got to speak with Jack and learn more about Nancy. If you're looking for any resources related to Nancy Anderson's case, anything that we talked about in the episode, head over to our blog. You can find it linked on our website, crimeclueless.com, under the contributors section. Don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Just search for @CrimeClueless. We'd love to hear from you. Connect with us, share your thoughts, your feedback. If you have any other follow-up questions, I would love to hear them. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review or even share our podcast. It really helps us out, and we are loving growing this amazing community. You can find Crime Clueless on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, and all major streaming platforms. So remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught off guard.